What if I told you that someone just handed out $10 million in cash to one of the poorest places on Earth, and it did not cause inflation? It did not make people lazy, and it actually multiplied the local economy by 2.5 times the amount that was given. This goes against everything you have been taught about how money works. Every economist, every politician, every financial expert has told you the same story. You cannot just give people free money. It will cause inflation. It will make them stop working. It will destroy the economy. Except that is complete garbage. And we finally have proof. In 2014, a massive experiment began in rural Kenya. Real money, real people, real results that challenge every assumption about poverty, inflation, and how economies actually function. And what happened over the next 2.5 years is about to completely change how you think about money, work, and what it actually takes to lift people out of poverty. Because the results were not what anyone expected. Here is what they did. They took over 600 villages in one of the poorest regions of Kenya. Average household income was about $1,000 per year. These are people who struggle to afford food, who cannot send their kids to school, who have no safety net when disaster strikes. And they gave eligible households $1,000 each. No strings attached. No requirements about how to spend it. Just straight cash delivered directly to their phones in 3 installments. $10 million total, dropped into an economy that desperately needed it. Now, before we go deeper into what happened when you inject that much money into a poor economy, if you are tired of hearing the same recycled lies about how money and poverty work, hit that subscribe button right now. This is Money Trap Channel, and we are exposing the systems and assumptions that keep people trapped while the wealthy play by completely different rules. We show you how economics actually works in the real world instead of in textbooks written by people who have never been poor. Subscribe, because what comes next will shatter everything you thought you knew about free money. Most economists would predict disaster from this experiment. They would point to Milton Friedman, one of the most influential economists in history, who famously said that inflation is always and everywhere a result of too much money. His theory was simple. If you rapidly increase the money supply without increasing production, you get inflation. Period. No exceptions. He said there has never been in history an extremely rapid increase in the quantity of money without inflation following. And $10 million dropped into an economy with a GDP of about $70 million represents a massive 15% increase in the money supply. According to Friedman, prices should have exploded. Here is how the theory works. Imagine an economy where everyone goes to the barber. Barbershops are always full. They are operating at maximum capacity. Now suddenly a charity gives the poorest people a bunch of money. These people can finally afford haircuts too. But the barbershops are already full. They cannot handle more customers. So what happens? Barbers raise their prices. More demand, same supply, higher prices. That is inflation. And because haircuts are the main economic activity in this example, higher barbershop prices means economy-wide inflation. The money helped some people afford haircuts, but on average, everyone is paying more and getting the same number of haircuts. No real benefit, just higher prices. This logic has dominated economic policy for decades. It is why central banks panic when they think too much money is circulating. It is why politicians argue against direct cash payments. It is why every stimulus program comes with warnings about inflation. But here is what actually happened in Kenya. Nothing. No inflation. Treated villages did not have higher inflation than control villages. Areas where tons of villages got money had the same inflation as areas where only a few villages got money. Prices stayed stable. The massive injection of cash that should have caused inflation, according to decades of economic theory, just did not do it. So what went wrong with the theory? Or more accurately, what did the theory miss about how real economies actually work? The answer changes everything. It turns out the barber shop in our example was not actually full. In Kenya, most businesses are single-person operations. A guy selling vegetables at a market, a woman running a small shop, a carpenter waiting for customers. And here is the critical part. These people are technically working all day, but they do not have customers all day. They are sitting there waiting, hoping someone will buy something. The barber shop is not full. It is mostly empty. This is what economists call an economy with slack, or an economy constrained by demand. So what happens when you drop cash into this type of economy? When people who got the money go to buy things, the barber does not need to raise prices. He is happy to finally have customers. The vegetable seller does not raise prices. She has been sitting with unsold vegetables all day anyway. The carpenter does not raise prices. He has been waiting for work. Demand increases, but supply increases to match it immediately, because all these entrepreneurs were already there, already working, just waiting for customers who could actually afford to buy. No inflation, just more transactions, more economic activity, more people actually earning money instead of sitting around waiting. This completely destroys Friedman's claim that there has never been a rapid increase in money supply without inflation. Here's proof. A 15% increase in money supply in 2.5 years. No inflation. It happened. It is documented. It is real. Now, to be fair, Friedman also said inflation happens when money supply increases faster than output. And you could argue that in this case, output increased to match the money supply. But that just proves the point. His theory assumed that output could not increase quickly, that economies are always operating near full capacity, that giving people money would just bid up prices. And that assumption is completely wrong in economies where people are poor and desperate for customers. But the story gets even better, because not only did this free money not cause inflation, it actually multiplied throughout the economy. This is where the second famous economist comes in. John Maynard Keynes predicted that when you inject money into an economy, especially a poor economy, it does not just help the people who receive it, it multiplies. He called this the multiplier effect. The logic is straightforward. You give someone $100. They spend it at a local shop. The shop owner now has $100. He spends $80 of it on supplies and saves $20. The supplier now has $80. She spends $60 and saves $20. And this continues. The original $100 creates a chain of spending that boosts the economy by more than $100. Keynes predicted that this multiplier effect would be bigger in poor communities than rich ones, because poor people spend almost all of the money they receive. Rich people save more. And in Kenya, his theory was proven spectacularly correct. For every dollar that was given directly to recipients, the overall economy grew by $2.50. Read that again. Every single dollar distributed generated $2.50 in economic benefit. The $10 million distributed created $25 million in economic growth. This is not theory. This is measured, documented, real. Think about what this means. Traditional development aid has been criticized for decades because so much money gets lost in the system. Administrative costs, corruption, inefficiency. Studies show that often only 30 or 40 cents of every dollar donated actually reaches poor people. And even when it does reach them, the benefits are unclear. Did that school we built actually improve outcomes? Did that training program actually help people earn more? It is hard to measure, but direct cash transfers are different. You can see exactly where the money goes. You can measure exactly what happens. And now we know that every dollar that reaches poor people generates $2.50 in economic benefit. Let me break down how this multiplication actually works in practice. Someone gets $1,000. They are behind on rent. They pay their landlord. The landlord has been struggling too. He uses that money to buy materials to fix his property. The material seller has been sitting with inventory he could not sell. Now he has income. He buys food from the market. The food seller has been barely surviving. Now, she has money to buy more inventory. Each person in this chain spends most of what they receive because they are poor and have real needs. And each transaction represents real economic activity that was not happening before because nobody had money. But it gets better. The study found that people who did not receive cash also benefited significantly. If you lived in a village where others got money, your income went up even if you got nothing directly. Why? Because suddenly people in your village could afford to buy things. If you were a shopkeeper, you had more customers. If you provided services, more people could pay you. If you sold food at the market, people actually had money to spend. This is the spillover effect, and it is massive. Non-recipients in high treatment areas saw their incomes rise significantly just from living near people who got cash. Now let us talk about the other big fear that economists and politicians always bring up when you mention giving people free money. They will become lazy. They will stop working. Why would anyone work if they can just get free money? This assumption is so deeply embedded in how we think about poverty that it barely gets questioned. Of course, people will stop working if you give them money. Right? Wrong. The study found no evidence that recipients worked less. In fact, working hours increased slightly for both recipients and non-recipients, though the increase was not statistically significant. What definitely did happen is that people used the money to become more productive. They invested in their businesses. They bought tools. They paid off debts that were holding them back. They sent their kids to school so the next generation would have better opportunities. One recipient used the money for school fees. Another restarted a fishing business that had been destroyed by a fire. Another built a house and bought goats to breed. These are not people who became lazy. These are people who finally had the resources to improve their situations. And here's the critical insight that privileged people always miss. Poor people are not poor because they are lazy or because they make bad decisions. They are poor because they do not have money. It sounds obvious when you say it like that, but somehow our entire economic system is built on the assumption that poverty is a personal failing, rather than a lack of resources. Think about it from their perspective. You want to start a small business selling vegetables, but you do not have money to buy inventory. You could work twice as hard, and it would not matter because you cannot start without capital. You want to send your kids to school, but school fees are due now, and you will not have money until after harvest. No amount of hard work changes that timing. You need medical care, but the clinic requires payment up front. Working harder does not create money when there are no jobs and no customers. The constraint is not effort, it is capital. It is demand. It is the simple fact that economic activity requires money to change hands. And if nobody has money, no activity happens no matter how hard everyone works. This is why traditional development aid has failed so spectacularly. We send experts to teach people business skills, but they do not have money to start businesses. We build schools, but families cannot afford to send kids there because they need them working to survive. We provide training in agriculture, but farmers do not have money to buy better seeds or tools. We treat poverty like an education problem, or a skills problem, or a culture problem, when really it is a money problem. People know what they need. They know how to improve their lives. They just do not have the resources to do it. And here is where it gets really interesting for how we think about economies in general. This experiment proves that in most poor economies, and probably in many rich economies too, the problem is not supply. It is demand. Businesses exist. People want to work. Products are available, but nobody can afford to buy anything. So businesses sit empty. Workers sit idle. Inventory sits unsold. The whole economy is operating way below its potential capacity, not because people are lazy, not because businesses are inefficient, but because there is not enough money circulating to facilitate transactions. This has massive implications for how we think about economic policy everywhere. When rich countries have recessions, governments argue about whether to increase spending. Some say it will cause inflation. Others say it will boost the economy. This experiment suggests that when an economy is slack, when unemployment is high and businesses are struggling, increasing the money supply through direct payments will boost economic activity without causing inflation. The money does not bid up prices. It activates unused capacity. It gets people spending and businesses producing. And the multiplier effect means the economy grows by more than the amount spent. But somehow this straightforward logic gets twisted by people who benefit from the current system. Banks and financial institutions love keeping money scarce because it increases their power. Wealthy people oppose direct payments because they benefit from desperate workers willing to accept low wages. Politicians reject cash transfers because they prefer programs where they can take credit and direct spending to their cronies. Everyone has an incentive to maintain the myth that giving poor people money will make them lazy or cause inflation, even though the evidence shows exactly the opposite. Now, I'm not saying that giving out free money is always the answer to everything. In a rich economy already operating at full capacity, yes, too much money could cause inflation. If everyone has jobs and businesses are maxed out, then adding more money just bids up prices because there is no unused capacity to activate. But that is not the situation for most people in most places. Most economies have massive amounts of slack. Most people are underemployed or stuck in jobs that do not use their talents. Most businesses could produce more if they had customers who could afford to buy. The constraint is demand, not supply. And direct cash transfers solve the demand problem immediately. This experiment also exposes how ridiculous traditional development aid has been. For decades, rich countries and international organizations have spent billions on development programs. They decide what poor people need. They hire consultants and NGOs and administrators. They build infrastructure that may or may not be useful. They implement programs designed in offices thousands of miles away by people who have never experienced poverty. And after all that spending, after all those jobs created for educated people from rich countries, the actual poor people see minimal benefit. Studies have shown that in many traditional aid programs, 70 or 80 cents of every dollar goes to overhead and administration. The people who are supposed to benefit get pennies. Compare that to direct cash transfers. Transaction costs are low. People receive most of the money. They decide how to spend it based on their actual needs and circumstances. There is no waste on programs that do not work. No corruption siphoning money away. No administrators deciding what is best for people they have never met. Just money going to people who need it, who then spend it in ways that make sense for their lives. And as this study proves, that money multiplies throughout the economy, benefiting everyone in the community. It is simpler. It is more effective. It is more respectful of poor people's agency and intelligence. And it works better than anything else we have tried. So why do not we do this everywhere? Why are not direct cash transfers the default way we address poverty? Because the current system benefits too many powerful interests. Development aid creates jobs for educated people from rich countries. It gives politicians something to point to and claim credit for. It allows corporations to get contracts. It makes wealthy people feel good about helping without actually redistributing meaningful resources. Direct cash transfers threaten all of that. They prove that poor people do not need experts to tell them what to do. They just need money. And that is a threatening message to everyone whose career depends on managing poverty rather than solving it. But the evidence is overwhelming now. Study after study shows that direct cash transfers work. They do not make people lazy. They do not cause inflation in economies with slack. They multiply throughout the economy. They improve health, education, nutrition, mental health, and every other measure of well-being. and they do it more cost-effectively than traditional aid programs. This should be the default. Every dollar spent on development should be compared to just giving that dollar directly to poor people. If your program cannot beat that benchmark, it should not exist. The experiment in Kenya proves something even more important. It proves that poverty is not complicated. It is not a puzzle that requires experts to solve. It is not a cultural problem, or an education problem, or a governance problem. It is a money problem. And we have always had the solution. We just have not had the political will to implement it. Because implementing it would require admitting that poverty exists because we allow it to exist. Because we choose systems that benefit the wealthy at the expense of everyone else. Because we prioritize the comfort of rich people over the survival of poor people. This is not just about Kenya. This is about how we think about economics everywhere. How we think about unemployment benefits. How we think about stimulus payments. How we think about minimum wage and labor rights and social safety nets. The same logic applies. When people do not have money, economies stagnate. Not because people are lazy, but because money is required for economic activity. And when you give people money, especially poor people who will spend it immediately, you activate economic capacity that was sitting idle. You create a multiplier effect that benefits everyone. You prove that the constraints on prosperity are not natural or inevitable. They are political choices. So here is what you need to understand. The next time someone tells you we cannot afford universal basic income or higher wages or better social programs because it will cause inflation or make people lazy, they are lying to you. This experiment proves it. The evidence is clear. The results are documented. Direct cash transfers to poor people boost economies, do not cause inflation when there is economic slack, and do not reduce work effort. Everything you have been told about why we cannot help poor people is propaganda, designed to protect a system that benefits the wealthy. The question is not whether direct cash transfers work. They do. The question is whether we have the political will to implement them on a large scale. Whether we are willing to challenge the powerful interests that benefit from keeping people poor and desperate. Whether we care more about evidence and outcomes or about maintaining comfortable myths that justify inequality. This experiment in Kenya showed us what is possible. It showed us that solving poverty is not complicated. We just have to decide that we actually want to solve it. Thanks for sticking with us through this. Make sure you check out the next video that is about to pop up on your screen. We are diving even deeper into the economic systems that keep people trapped while telling them it is for their own good. This is Money Trap, and we will see you in the next one.